All right, welcome back, everyone. I know we took last week off, but I'm excited to be back this week. And we have what is one of my favorite classes in recipes and methods, which is the Vietnamese spring rolls and a couple of dipping sauces. So we're going to be using that as one example of representative of the foods of Southeast Asia. So the primary types of cuisine that we see in the US that are representative of Southeast Asia are the foods of Vietnam and Thailand. So I just want to start by talking about those. But before, I just want to give a quick shout out to Jessica, who has organized and spearheaded this entire class with Community Food Share, and also Anna, who's provided interpretation each week for us. This is the last virtual class. I just want to say thanks to both of you. And if we could kind of silently clap for them, because without them, the class wouldn't be in its current form. So thank you both. So in terms of the foods of Southeast Asia, well, Thailand and Vietnam, much like Chinese and Indian cuisine that we have talked about a little, is the foods that we see in the US is often an Americanized version of that country's food. Whereas when you go and explore and really understand the foods of those countries, each region within those countries has different methods, techniques, spice levels, ingredients, and culinary traditions. So again, when we look at some of these foods, especially Thai food, which is known as having some of the spiciest cuisine in the world, that's largely due to some of the peppers that they have, just the flavors that they integrate, very powerful, very vibrant flavors. And also within all of the regional Thai cuisines, they have really are bouncing and balancing 5 flavors. One of the biggest differences between American and European cuisine and Thai cuisine, for example, is they're using all 5 flavors, meaning sour, salty, sweet, bitter, and spicy. There is another 6th flavor people sometimes add, which is umami, you know, that depth of flavor given by things like fish sauce, which we're going to talk about, mushrooms, very pungent foods, but primarily those are the 5 tastes that the human palate can recognize and understand. And so the Vietnamese food as well often touches on 4 or 5 of those taste elements. So that's one of the things that really set this cuisine apart. Another piece I want to talk about to start on the nutrition side is today's nutrition piece is, and I welcome questions on this topic, which you could put it into the chat for Jessica to read out. So when we're talking about gluten-free, so a lot of the cuisine of this region is gluten-free. So when we talk about gluten and gluten intolerance, the ingredients, the primary ingredients that contain the molecule known as gluten are wheat, primarily in our country, wheat, but also rye, barley, and then oats are often processed in facilities or factories that use wheat. So those are, in most cases, contain some level of gluten. The foods that we're going to be cooking with today and many of the foods of this region are more rice-based. So for example, we'll be using rice noodles, which I'll talk here, and we'll talk through the preparation on how we've made these. And then the rice spring roll wrappers that we'll be using to wrap these Vietnamese spring rolls today. So gluten intolerance takes many forms. Many people are slightly gluten intolerant, where it might bother, aggravate you in terms of eating if you eat a lot of bread, wheat-containing products. And other people have what's known as celiac disease, which is a different condition, which is an autoimmune condition that actually, when you have the gluten and you ingest it, it flattens the villi, the small little hairs of the intestine, and it actually causes damage and can cause those to break. And it has other autoimmune effects, so it's more of a holistic sort of body effect. So that's a whole different piece. But many people, being gluten intolerant, or if you're not sure and you're just thinking about whether you might be gluten intolerant or if it's having an effect on your gut and your overall health, you could certainly talk to your doctor or a dietitian about that. And the easiest way to try that or try and see how that feels for you would be to give up or eliminate gluten-containing items from your diet for a period of time, often maybe 2 or 3 weeks it may take to really kind of understand if it's having an effect. And a elimination diet, they call it, which is the same that you might do if you think you may be intolerant to dairy or other items. So I just want to kind of talk about that because some products, even at the store, there might be one version that contains gluten and one that doesn't. So for example, with the soy sauce that I picked up today, tamari, it's a gluten-free soy sauce and it's labeled as such, whereas most soy sauce does contain some gluten. So it's a little tricky and hard to understand, but now more than ever in the marketplace, there are more gluten-free products, but a lot of products and recipes, including some that we've done in this class, are naturally gluten-free and also are just a little bit lighter and more fruit and vegetable based. So that's really how we chose to design some of these recipes for the class. Especially this time of year in the United States, it's really our best chance to get some great produce. And so designing recipes that are focused on fruits and vegetables is really important to most of us because most of us don't eat enough fruits and vegetables in our diet. The Vietnamese spring rolls that we're doing today, it's going to be all vegetarian. We are going to use tofu as the protein for it. However, again, I love to talk about variations, and if you've ever had Vietnamese spring rolls, the most common variations containing meat or seafood would be a shrimp. Many times they will cut a shrimp like sideways, kind of just in thin pieces, and they'll lay that across the top of the spring roll. So that's one variation of what we're doing today. Also, there's a popular pork version where you might take a shredded or slow cooked pork and just lay that across the top of the roll. So again, we're highlighting and showing a vegetarian version today, but it does have meat-based opportunities too with today's dish. I want to stop there for a minute and just see if there's any questions come on that discussion of gluten or on the foods of Southeast Asia piece. No, I'm taking that as no. But feel free again as we go here to just pop in a question if you have any questions throughout. So now I'm going to talk about a few of the ingredients we're using today because there are a few different type of things. Again, everything commonly available at King Soopers. I should mention today I'm in West Michigan. This is the first version of Community Plate on the road. I'm actually traveling, so I did have to hunt a little around the supermarket, but I did find everything once again at a Kroger type supermarket out here. It took me a little longer, when you're shopping and you're not familiar with the market, but I found all these products there. So I'm going to talk about, we're going to start with the rice-based pieces. So the spring roll wrappers. So this is what we're using as the wrapper to the Vietnamese spring roll. Interestingly, if you've never made these, what we're going to be doing with these to handle them, I'll read you the ingredients. Really, the ingredients are rice flour, tapioca flour, water, and salt. So really very simple. And they're very thin, and we're going to be right before we wrap. So we're going to prepare all the ingredients, all the sauces, everything ready. And then we will just gently lay those in a container of warm water, a large bowl of warm water, just warm tap water. And we'll just put it in for just a few seconds, maybe 10 to 15 seconds, depending on the heat of the water. And then you'll pull them out and set it down, and we'll do our final roll. So we won't come back to these for a little bit, but that's one of the ingredients that is essential for this dish. The other, as far as the noodles that you put inside the dish, you could use a variety. This is a thin rice noodle. This is the brand that I found. This one has a cooking instruction against the thinnest one, so it's almost like a vermicelli, like a very, very thin spaghetti sort of shape. So with this one, you bring a large pot of water to a boil. I've already done this step. You add these noodles, stirring gently. You cook 3 to 4 minutes till they're just cooked. And then importantly, you throw them into a colander, drain them, and then rinse with cold water as you toss them. So these will be kind of served at room temperature or coldish, and that's how this wrap is meant to be served. You can use thicker noodles. These thin ones are just kind of nice because they're easy to eat. It makes the whole finished spring roll kind of simple and soft, has like a softness to it. So I am going to kind of rehydrate these because I cooked them about 30 minutes ago, but you can see they're already getting a little gummy, kind of a little stuck, even though I put cold water. So the recommendation is to set them in a bit of warm water, which I'll do. and let them kind of loosen up in some warm water, and then pull them out, drain them again. So I'll kind of bring these back to life before we do the final one. A few of the other ingredients that we're using for the sauces today. Another thing I really like about this dish is that the spring rolls themselves are not heavily seasoned or salted. They're just fresh. It's crisp, it's vegetable based, and they're not heavily seasoned or salted. But then the dipping sauces is where the interesting flavors and tastes come. So that's where these ingredients are being used. So this is the tamari soy sauce. Every soy sauce, in my experience, has a different level of salt. So you may want to kind of go gently with the soy sauce at first in the sauce recipes or in using it in general. Some are low sodium, some are high sodium. This one's kind of in the middle, I'm finding. So just be aware that there's different salt levels in each.
And then
This
Stephen,
one,
oh,
yep,
sorry, we do have a question about the rice papers.
sure.
So are rice wrappers a high carb food item?
Good question. Well, there's not much to them. They're not super substantial. That's a good question. So this one, for example, in each wrapper, I'm just reading the label here. Each wrapper has 7 grams of carbohydrate. They are, I would say, most likely higher on the glycemic index, so they may be absorbed more quickly because it's just simply like a rice flour, very easily absorbed as you eat it. I wouldn't say this is a high carb item, given that one wrapper is 7 grams of carbs. However, if you combine that with the noodles, let's see, because you'd be eating them together. The rice noodles per serving for our use is about 20 grams. So then you're talking 27 grams of carbs. Again, I would say kind of moderate level. It's more like if you're concerned about the absorption and how it might affect your blood glucose. I'd say these things probably would be higher on the glycemic index, but probably kind of medium on the overall carbs. And you could, if you were concerned or you simply wanted a lower carb, you could just use more of the lettuce, cucumber, and carrot in the dish, and tofu inside, and then less of the rice noodle. So that's another cool thing. Each one is adaptable. You could even make each roll adaptable or with a different mix. So
Great. And there was a second part to that question. So they said, I know putting rice in the fridge overnight can lower the carbs. Does that work with rice noodles?
Incrementally, I would say, like a little, but not substantially. It's not really going to substantially change the carbs in the dish. No.
Thank you.
Yep, of course. The next ingredient can be a little polarizing. Some people love or hate. This is one of the brands of what we call fish sauce. So the ingredients in this are listed as anchovy and sea salt. So it sounds somewhat, simple, but it's also a fermented product. So the anchovies and the fish are fermented. So it is kind of funky. Like I wouldn't recommend just taking a taste of it out of a spoon. There's also an odor to it that some people describe as fishy. Other people describe as a bit stinky or yes, more of a negative characteristic. So I'd say before you use this, maybe just take like a taste or a smell, maybe just try like a drop of it. Kind of think, okay, do I like fish in general? Interestingly, anchovies are also a part of like some or most Caesar dressings. So if you like Caesar dressing and that kind of funk and powerful flavor, which again is that umami or sixth element of flavor, you will probably like this. But you could also, if you'd rather not use the fish sauce and make it vegetarian, then you could use soy sauce or additional soy sauce. This one, again, you can use as much or as little as you like. This recipe just has a small amount, 1 to 2 teaspoons in the sauce. It's the sriracha sauce. So the chili sauce, this isn't the most popular item. Most popular brand is called Hui Fong. You've probably seen it with the rooster, but they've had some challenges as a company. And so you're seeing less of that. And then you're seeing some other chili sauces known as sriracha, called sriracha. They're sort of filling that void in the market. But they're all pretty similar. The ingredients in this are red chili, vinegar, salt, sugar, garlic powder, salt, xanthan gum. So kind of a sweet, salty, funky chili that to most people's palates, in my experience, goes pretty well. It's not crazy hot. It's just kind of a middle of the road, but flavorful, nice, flavorful. So in mixing these three, we're going to end up with some really powerful flavors in these sauces that we make today. All right. And then we're also using garlic and some ginger, which we've used in other classes, and again, are very prevalent and heavily used ingredients in this region of the world as well. All right, before we do some food prep and we go down to the board here, I have another thing. We're just spotlighting two other ingredients, one of which we're using today, which is tofu, and the other, which is another soy-based product, tempeh. So the reason I want to talk about these is you might have seen them at the supermarket. You may or may not have tried them. Tofu is more popular in the US, tempeh a little bit less, but still available pretty much everywhere. I want to talk a little bit about the characteristics of these two and how we're going to use them today. So tofu I'll start with. So tofu is made from a cooked soy curd. So it's essentially a brick that's been pressed. I've already drained the liquid out of here. It just comes in a little liquid to keep it preserved and fresh. It doesn't dry out. Several grades of tofu. This is what's known as firm. There's also extra firm, so in which more of the liquid has been reduced. And then there's also soft and silken. So if you ever want to add some powerful protein, vegetarian type protein to a smoothie, most people choose silken because it doesn't have as much of a like granular texture. You won't really taste the beaniness as much. It's more like smooth and just goes in nicely into a smooth drink or a smoothie. You know, for many children, including my own, like tofu and small pieces of raw tofu was one of their first foods because it's kind of nice, it's mashable, it's easy to eat for a small child. So it's really kind of an elemental food and you know, one of the best sources of vegetarian protein. What I'm going to do with this tofu is I'm going to cut it in slices. I do want to get a little bit more of the, I'll show you the board here. I want to get a little bit more of this liquid out of it, and we're going to kind of make it a little more dense for our use. So I'll just show you here. Sit and talk through it here. Oops. I'm working with one camera today, so I'm going to try and zone it in. Okay. So you see the brick of tofu. I'm just cutting small, kind of thin slices, maybe ½ inch thick. And if you ever see a recipe that says press and drain tofu, this is really what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm simply taking a regular plate. I'm just putting these slices on the plate. And you don't need a ton of weight on it to make this work. You don't need to like smash it down with a brick or anything really heavy. But in order to get a little bit more of the water out and just make it a little more dense, we're just going to set another plate on top of it, like that. And then we're just going to leave this for 20, 30 minutes, really while we do our class here. It could be longer, up to an hour. It will produce some liquid, so you want to just make sure it's not like dripping over onto anything. And that's what we're doing. The tofu, just to dense it up a little and make sure that when we make our spring rolls, it's not going to kind of kick out too much liquid into the roll. So, all right, so we'll come back to that. That tofu could, for this purpose, could either be used raw. We're using it raw today. We're just going to cut it in some smaller, thinner pieces for the spring rolls. Or you could fry it, like shallow fry it, kind of get it kind of golden brown as well. Really your preference. That adds a little extra color and a little texture. So the other soy-based product today, again, a little less commonly used, is tempeh. So tempeh has a whole kind of different characteristic and texture. What it is whole soybeans that have been compressed and also fermented really over time with a mold. Don't think mold as in bad mold. It's like a mold that's good and beneficial and really actually helps partially break down the beans themselves so that it's more digestible. However, tempeh itself is still not digestible unless you cook it. So might give you a stomach ache. It's just not easy for your body to work with unless you cook it in some way. So my favorite way, if you're just trying it for the first time, if you've never had it, and even again, this works for kids as well, in my experience, is to fry it in some oil. Again, shallow fry it with some olive oil, which is what I've done here. Oops. And then it comes more like a crispy tempeh bite. So I think it's kind of an appealing and simple way to prepare the tempeh. It has texture, it has color. I added a sprinkle of salt. And it's just like a nice kind of starting point of trying the tempeh. And then tempeh could be used in stir fry, could be used, this could be put on salads. You could, use it in any way you'd like. So I'd encourage you at least give it a try sometime if you're feeling experimental. It's usually found in the same section with the tofu at the grocery store. So as far as protein, if you're interested, so per 3-ounce serving, this tempeh contains 16 grams of protein. And then the tofu contains less because it's more or has more water or liquid content. Still a good source, but for a 3-ounce serving, 7 grams of protein. So the tempeh is more nutrient dense, but again, tofu may be more appealing to certain people's tastes. So, and I forgot to mention, tempeh is traditionally an Indonesian food, so that's really where it originated at first, and now it's spread around the world from there. They're both soy-based products. So, any questions on tofu or tempeh or applications? Okay, I'm gonna point down at the board now, and we'll talk about some of the fresh produce, and we'll use some of the knife skills that we've been building on in other classes, and just do the vegetable prep for the spring rolls. So the three main, just adjusting the camera here. The three main vegetables we're using today is like a fresh, crisp romaine lettuce, carrots, which we've used and cut before, cut into thin strips, like matchstick-sized pieces, and cucumber. So, cucumber and carrot are some of the most widely used vegetables everywhere, and form the basis of even like, the most common vegetarian sushi roll has cucumber and carrot. They're crisp, they're delicious, and really well liked. Another thing we'll be doing for this roll, in order to reduce that wateriness or the moisture content, is we'll be taking the seeds out of the center of the cucumber so that those aren't a part of the finished dish. So I'm just going to cut down the center here. And then I'll use a small spoon to just pull out the seeds into this bowl. Sound effects. Okay, so we've hollowed these out, and now we're just going to cut them again thin strips. We don't want them to be too chunky. Again, we want this whole finished dish to be really easy to eat. So I'm just going to cut these. This is kind of like how we cut the ginger a few weeks back. You're cutting it in small strips this way.
Stephen, it looks like it's not focused on the cutting board.
Oh, okay, here we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. It's like self-adjusting here. Okay, how's that?
I think that's better.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jessica. Sorry, I'm working with one camera today. So we'll just keep adjusting it as I need to. So I'm cutting it just in thin strips this way. And then, as you can see, each one of these, if they're a little thick, some are thicker than others, so I'm just going to cut some of these in half. And then I'll cut them in, I'd say 2 to 3 inch pieces. So you end up with some pretty thin strips. Oh, this one, that'll be enough for what we need for today. If you have any big ones in there, larger ones, you could cut them down a little further. Couple. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Got a nice little pile of thin cucumber strips. The other option with this and the carrot is if you don't want to, if it's challenging for you to get them into these thin enough strips, you could also use a grater or a box grater to just grate these. And then you could use a grated cucumber and a grated carrot for this dish. So I always want to give alternatives. So I'll just set these aside. And then we'll go to the carrots. So same situation, same kind of basic method with the carrots. Again, taking a round vegetable is challenging, so I'm going to cut the ends. And then cut down the carrot. I'll go in half to give us a flat surface. Having a sharp knife certainly helps this whole process. So cut this way. And again, in terms of your knife work, you're really just keeping the knife on the board and just sliding it down the vegetable. Carrots are some of the trickier vegetables to cut, they're just due to their hardness. So take your time and use as sharpest knife you have, I could say. You could even use a smaller knife for this purpose. So I've got my strips. Cut these a couple more times. These ones are a little wide. And this is a little tedious, but this will pay off when we get to the final wrap. So also because if you have like big chunks of carrot, they can kind of poke through the rice paper and just, you know, make it less than perfect. So I got a nice pile of thin strips. Again, 2 to 3 inch pieces. Nice little pile of thin carrots. It's a little big. And again, we'll set these aside for later. If you were going to prep these the day before, you could put those in water. It's kind of the best way to, you know, keep carrots nice is to keep them preserved in some water. So now the lettuce. So lettuce is going to be really the main basis of the center of the wrap is the lettuce and the rice paper. So with the romaine, again, same thing. You want to make sure that you're cutting really thin strips, as thin as you can, so that they fit nicely into the wrap and don't protrude through. Oh, sorry for the meandering camera, everyone. Oh, more sound effects. So nice crisp lettuce. Again, keep it cold, as cold as you can. Again, you want, I'd say in terms of volume, you want to try to get about as much of the lettuce as you do of the rice noodles, roughly. Because I think a half and half mix is pretty nice. So. All right. Okay, so we have our main vegetables prepped. I'll set those aside. As far as the herbs or fresh herbs, in the recipe it lists several. It lists basil, mint, and cilantro. I picked out the basil today, it just looked the best at the store. And basil is pretty plentiful this time of year. You could do a combination too. You could do basil, mint, cilantro, or any combination of the three. So just depending on your taste and likes. But basil, if you ever tried to keep basil, it's one of the hardest herbs to keep nice because the ideal temperature that it likes to stay at is somewhere between 45 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So obviously your fridge is colder than that and your countertop is usually warmer than that. So, you know, it's hard, but trying to find a place in your kitchen or in your space that's kind of cool, but not too cold, can be tricky. But I think the best thing is just to buy it or pick it as close to when you're going to use it as you can, as with most things, but particularly with something like basil. So, but this is going to be really a nice flavorful piece of the dish. I strongly encourage you to at least try one of the three fresh herbs that's listed. So. All right, so the next piece we're going to do, I'm going to continue to work with this camera, but I think I'll try to just keep the focus a little bit further out here, is we will do the peanut sauce. We'll do the sauces next, and then we'll finish with the spring rolls themselves. So this is the peanut sauce. So again, really well-liked sauce. This is typically used as a dipping sauce for these spring rolls, but this sauce is really nice if you thin it out a little bit to use with like noodles and make like a peanut sauce cold noodle type of dish with scallions, carrots. So this is kind of a dish or a sauce that you could keep and then use for other purposes. So the recipe says you can use any type of peanut butter, which you can. The only thing I'll caution is that if you use a peanut butter like this, which is really just peanuts and salt are the only ingredients, it's a little thicker and there's really no sugar added. So if you used a sweeter peanut butter, I would say just know that you won't need to add the sugar, probably won't need to add the sugar that's listed in the ingredients. So, but for today, because this is just peanuts, it's also thick, so I might need to add a little more warm water kind of in the final stage. So we're gonna mix this up together. We have lime juice. So again, back to our flavors, we've got the sour. This is a double batch. I'm making a little bit bigger batch today just to hold and keep. So lime juice. Mix that in gently. The other liquids that we're adding are the soy sauce and the sweet chili sauce. This sauce doesn't have the fish sauce, so it's just soy sauce and sweet chili. Again, you can vary the amount of sweet chili sauce depending on how spicy you want this. It'll come together. You just have to do a good amount of mixing. That's why I'm using a whisk here. The texture will bring itself together. I may or may not need to add the warm water for this, depending on the texture that it ends up here. As it says in the recipe, you want it a little thicker if you're using it as a dipping sauce and thinner if you were to use it like in a noodle dish or as a sauce in another dish. So, lastly, I'm adding the minced garlic. We've minced garlic before in this class numerous times. And then this is a touch of ginger. Ginger is optional. I just like ginger. I like the kick that ginger provides. And here's the sugar. So. All right. I'm gonna add a touch of warm water. The interesting thing when adding warm water to peanut sauce, because of the fattiness of the peanut butter, is that it kind of changes the color sometimes as well as the texture. It can turn it a little bit whitish. And sometimes it almost seems to thicken it more at first, but then it will thicken it, or it will thin it eventually. So it's kind of a funny process, but I'm gonna add a little more. You want it to just kind of fall off the whisk. So if you find yourself adding a lot of water to thin it out because of the texture of the peanut butter or other reasons, you may need to adjust the seasoning and maybe add a touch of salt because you're adding that water to it. So, but I like this. This is good. It's kind of drippy. It's gonna I can tell it's gonna go really nicely when we dip the spring rolls in this. So I'll set that aside. Again, peanut sauce can be used in a variety of applications. If you like peanuts and that flavor, really delicious for any application. Dip vegetables in it, noodle dishes, spinach noodle with peanut sauce. I mean, you can take a lot of different directions with it. Okay, so the other sauce is much thinner. It's also typical Vietnamese dipping sauce. This is the fish sauce with garlic, so very potent, powerful flavor bomb here. We have warm water with the sugar. So I'm just gonna give that a quick mix to incorporate the sugar. This is a little bit cleaner flavor profile of this, and a little, it's just clear and more liquid. So I think it's a nice alternative. It's nice to have both on offer if you do make spring rolls. But it still has the sweet, the salty from the fish sauce, the garlicky, kind of pungent, and the sour. So it's got it all in balance. Then the spicy, we're gonna chop up a chili in there. So that's gonna really hit it with the last bit of flavor. So I'll Add the sweetened water, lemon or lime juice. And then the chili, it called for a bird's eye chili, which is a particular variety I could not find. So I'm just using a jalapeno. Similar heat level. Again, it's up to you how hot to make it. So if you want it hotter, obviously use the seeds, chop the seeds up and the whole thing. If you want just the flavor of the pepper, less heat, you could remove the seeds. Either way, just don't touch your eyes after cutting. I'm sure you know, anyone who's ever done that. So for this crowd, I am going to make it hotter because I do like it a spicier level. I'm gonna make it as hot as I can given the pepper. So I'm just gonna cut this in small strips and then mince it up. Sorry, I apologize for the camera challenges. See now. I'm gonna get a good mince on it, like not quite as heavily minced as the garlic, but close. Right, so that's the final piece of that sauce. It is good if you can let the sauce sit a little bit just for those flavors to kind of meld. But there it is. So again, quite a lot more liquidy, but kind of a nice counterpoint to that thicker peanut-based dressing. All right, so there's our two sauces. And now we're ready for assembly. So I'm gonna zoom this out a little bit. Okay, so first we're going back to our tofu, which has been pressed. And I can tell it's already given off some liquid from the pressing. So, see, we're gonna revisit this. It's just kind of exuded some liquid. You can see it's like pooling around. And so I'm just gonna pour off that liquid. And then cut these into just really strips, sort of like around the size of the cucumber and the carrot. So keep it kind of consistent. So I'm just gonna cut it here. So that everything's roughly the same size and shape. If you were to want to fry or cook the tofu, you could cook it or fry it kind of in this state, and then you could slice it up a bit from there. We're just going to go with the raw tofu for today. Put that aside. All right, and we are ready to begin assembly. So this part is kind of the time sensitive and somewhat delicate part. So we'll run through this. And again, you want to serve these ideally the day of. They can they sometimes stick together a bit. You want to kind of keep them a little bit loose in a container in the fridge. If you want to store them for the next day, ideally they're served the same day. So I've just taken a bowl with just hot tap water. I'll just show you one of the wraps just to show you how it looks as it goes in and comes out. So kind of cool, interesting texture. You can just see that it's almost translucent, like you can see through it before you put it in. And then in the recipe, it says to dip a third of it and then the other third and take your time with it. But in my mind, if you're quick about working with it, you can just put this directly in the water for I do like a 10 count and then check on it. And we'll see if it's at a texture and a place that we can work with it. when you put it in the water, it almost disappears. Like it looks like it's gone. It kind of loses all of that texture and color. And what you're looking for is for it to, like you can see it's not long enough because you can see the texture. It still has that texture to it. So you want to see that texture kind of disappear. And then you want it to be soft and easy to work with. Ideally without any like stiffness or cracking. So I'm gonna pull this out and get it on my board. I'm actually going to use another one because you can see it ripped a couple times. I think I was a little heavy-handed in bringing it out. That's not ideal. So I'm going to run a different one. I also kind of allowed the edges of it to fold and kind of crimp on each other, which is not great because it's hard to unglue or unstick those once they get that way. So I'm going to go for route 2. There's usually, this one has 16 per pack, so certainly you're going to lose a couple. I often lose a couple. It's just like, they don't work out, or even as you wrap, they may not work out, but it's a learning experience like most things. So I'm just going to give it a little quicker soak time. I think I let it go a little too long. Again, it's highly dependent on the temperature of the water. So if your water out of your tap is really hot, it'll go faster. If it's cooler, it'll go slower. So all right, here we go. This one's looking better. No rips, it's not folding, but it's soft and ready to work with. So I'm going to start with the rice noodles. So pull these out. Again, it's kind of like wrapping or rolling like a burrito or any type of like rolled item, like a burrito type of style. You don't want too much inside, but you don't want too little. So I'd say one of the most common problems is put too much inside. Because at this point you're hungry and you've been cooking and you want it to be good, right? So I'm just going to lay down like a platform of the rice noodles. Some romaine on top. And then I'm going to add the carrots. I'll just do probably 3 or 4 carrots, 3 or 4 cucumbers. And then I'll finish with the tofu. I'll do 3 tofu. Actually, I'll finish with the basil. Sorry, it's really nice to finish, if you can, with the fresh herbs, because then you can actually make the leaves visible from the outside. So you can kind of layer those nicely. The rest of this is a bit of a pile, but the leaves, if they can show through to the outside, make like a nice touch. Or if you were doing shrimp or pork, you could have that on the outside too. Sometimes you'll see the shrimp on the outside, kind of showcase that. But in this case, the basil is our topper, and any other fresh herbs you want to use. And then we're just rolling. Again, I'd compare it to like a burrito wrap. Rolling, tucking the sides in, keep it in. And then it kind of wants to stick to itself. It's kind of like it's self-adhering. So if you have the right amount of gumminess and you've soaked the wrapper enough, it'll stick to itself. So then, as you can see, we've got all the ingredients. One of the coolest things is that it's all visible, so you can see what you have. The customer, guest in a restaurant setting, or anyone you're serving this to will kind of know what's in it. And then you take this and dip this into either the peanut-based dressing or the spicier, thinner dipping sauce. You have a really delicious either appetizer or even a main meal. If you wanted to serve 2 or 3 of these per person, this could be like the main item. So again, just a great summer dish, really any time of year. I think it's vegetable forward, it's crispy, it's delicious, and then it's enhanced by the flavors, and each person can choose what dish or what what type of sauce they add to it. And so it's very customizable, which is what, people want. And I think a really solid introduction, if you are intimidated by cooking cuisine or food from Asia, to try this dish as like a nice little starter that's complex in a way, but also fairly inexpensive. And yeah, just like a nice intro and starter point with Vietnamese cuisine. So I'm gonna zoom this out. Apologize for the camera challenges today. I'm sorry, I was working just off one iPad, so I know it was a bit hard to follow, but yeah, just check in. I want to see if anyone has any questions on the process and what we've done today.
Not a question, but somebody did mention, in case anyone is interested, there is a locally made tempeh called Project Umami that is the best my family has ever tried. We also eat a high protein, extra firm tofu that my kids like more than any other kind.
Yeah, thank you for that. I am familiar with that project. I think that their tempeh is amazing as well. And I think the tofu point is a good one because some people may say or think they don't like tofu. I don't like tofu, but maybe they've had it a certain way, a certain style, a certain preparation that they didn't like, but there's many other ways to have it. I still remember 3 or 4 years ago, my father-in-law said he didn't like tofu, and so I made him a recipe using silken tofu without him knowing, made him a silken tofu recipe, silken tofu chocolate pudding that was super flavorful and delicious. And of course he liked it. And I said, yeah, it was mostly tofu. And so I think it's just a reminder that, yeah, you don't really know unless you kind of have fully explored an ingredient or even had it just a certain way. And I think that's especially true with children in their formative years, but also with adults as we introduce ourselves to new foods and try new things that maybe, again, I really think that people might grow in or out of tastes and likes and dislikes during their life. Many people don't like mushrooms, for example, but maybe they try them again in a different preparation or 10 years down the road and they say, oh, wow, those are actually good mushrooms. So sometimes it's a bad experience with bad mushrooms or canned mushrooms or something that didn't go down well. So I think it's a whole world to explore, and I think staying open to new tastes is a challenge for all of us. So.
Can
Feel
beef
free to shoot.
chicken, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go, you go.
Can beef or chicken be used as well?
Yes, I was going to. Want to talk about both those. Thank you. So what I would do if you did chicken and added a line of or a row of chicken on this roll would be I would take a chicken tender or chicken breast or chicken thigh, cook it nicely, keep it moist, and then just slice it very thinly, as thinly as you can, essentially, and then just lay those strips on top in place of the tofu. And then beef, I would say you could do a flank steak or skirt steak or even a tenderloin, beef tenderloin, anything that you could cook kind of medium rare, medium, and then same thing, slice it as thinly as possible, lay that across the top. Because what you don't want is anything too thick or chewy in there because you want people to just bite through the roll and not have too much resistance. So you just want to have a way to make a nice thin, tender piece, but it'd be delicious. And I think especially if you maybe crusted that with a little bit of extra flavor, extra salt, pepper, garlic, some element of other flavor to that meat, then that could add like yet another level or depth of flavor.
Someone also asked if you can use sun butter instead.
I have not personally used sun butter, but I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, sun butter is a great correlate or substitute for peanut butter in almost every recipe that I've used. So I don't see why not. If you like sun butter, if you like that flavor of sun butter, I think it'd work great in this application. Again, you might just have to play with the texture. Sun butter sometimes can dry out or be dry, especially if you've had it for a while. So you might just need to add a bit more warm water at the end to get that texture where you want it to be.
Do you have any other suggestions on alternatives for the peanut butter?
I mean, cashew butter, almond butter. Beyond nut butters and sun butter, I mean, you could achieve a certain thickness if you kind of integrated, almost like an aioli. You could kind of you could whip like an olive oil into like an egg mixture, but that would really kind of be a whole different class or type of sauce. So no, I think maybe it would be, if you're interested but don't like any of those nut butters, then I think maybe just you could try some of these other sauces, because there's a whole world or slew of other sauces you could just research or look into that are just a whole different nature. But I do think for that particular sauce is just for the texture, the flavor, the consistency. I think that nut butter, some version of nut or some butter would be kind of the basis. So I think if you could take it in a different direction, but it would just be a different sauce. Still open to questions, but I just want to also advertise, if anyone is local and does live in Colorado, and is interested, this is the last of the virtual classes. So thank all of you for coming to all of these, or as many as you were able to make. We are having an in-person class, kind of a special like culminating event next week on the next Wednesday, 7th, from 5:30 to 6:30 at Community Food Share. And we are asking everyone, if you could, to prepare, make a dish from your background, your family, your cuisine, something that you want to make and share with the group. And then I'll be presenting and bring a set of ingredients and some plates, and we're going to do some plating. We're going to talk about plating, presentation, a little bit about food styling and food photography, so that you can just Instagram your way now that you have all these great, cool recipes, and a little bit about the visual elements of food while we just enjoy that in good company and have food together, break bread together. So really encourage everyone who could to make it. I'm excited to meet some of you who've been attending, and if you can, there'll be a whole separate piece. Maybe Jessica probably has the method of how to sign up, but to RSVP for probably similar you've been doing for these classes. So it'd be really cool to make it. But if you can't and you aren't able to attend next week, I just want to say thank you for your attendance, and please do spread the word and let people know about the class, because we do have these classes available and archived on video format and are free to anyone. So please share those out with friends, family, colleagues, and we want to just share the word. And we just love cooking. We love cooking, and there's nothing like cooking together. There's nothing like sharing ideas, recipes, and time together. And I really appreciate all of you. So again, thanks so much. Hope to see some of you next week, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.